Joining us now, Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, nice to see you this morning, and thank you for coming on the program at a time where we are told the President is working on this shutdown standoff on an hour-by-hour basis. What can you tell us has changed in recent hours?
He is. I've spoken with the President, and Sandra, he has said that he's ready to receive a counteroffer from the Democrats. It's been many, many days since the House passed its $5.6 billion for border security. It's not restricted to just a wall. It's what CPB says they need. They need technological enhancements, physical barriers, the steel slats the President has tweeted about and talked about from the Oval and elsewhere. It's just that border security is national security, and we have a flood of drugs coming into this country and into our communities. We have obviously an increase in gang members coming over. You saw just what happened to Officer Singh in California, God rest his soul, murdered by a criminal alien who had come back into this country, should not have been here in California, a sanctuary state or in a sanctuary city. And this is somebody who, we've got 31 sanctuary cities, 6 sanctuary states. You've got people who want to make us an entire sanctuary country. We just need Democrats to come to the table and be honest with themselves and who they've been in the recent past. 39 Democrats this past year voted for some kind of physical barriers and border security enhancements, and this summer 10 of them on a committee voted for DHS funding.
Before you go on there, I want to dig into two things that you just said. The President's waiting on Democrats to respond, and we know that he tweeted about that. He said waiting on Democrats to come on over and make a deal. What we're hearing from Democrats is the President's not reaching out to us. So there's a lot of blame being thrown around. Has the President directly contacted Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer in recent days? Has he reached out specifically to any Democrats?
The President has made very clear that the House passed the package, and then what happened here is what always happens, Sandra, is that the Senate then received it. And it is with them. They can counteroffer, they can sign the $5.6 billion, which is a modest investment in our nation's security. When you think of the $800 billion they spent on a stimulus package in the last administration, any sundry list of items that they fund to the billions of dollars, $4 trillion budget or so, we should have it $5 billion for border security. It's just a modest investment. And by the way, Democrats themselves have been for secure fences. They've been for border security. They've been for enhancements. I prefer Chuck Schumer 2006 and 2009 to Chuck Schumer 2018 and 19, where he has the amnesia about how he voted for the Secure Fences Act, how he said enhanced border security is a good way to keep out illegal immigration. So we have to be honest about the flood of drugs and crime and gangs that are coming over. That's not everybody. That's not most people. But we do know from the DHS statistics that a number of women are saying they're being assaulted. The number of people saying they're being assaulted, women saying they're being sexually assaulted, is up. The number of children and family units that CPB, our Customs and Border Patrol, are being asked to absorb is overwhelming the system. We have the Flores decision from the courts, and we have the Congress that fails to close the loophole. They can close the loophole and not close the border.
Kellyanne, it sounds even like talking to you right now that there's room for compromise on the part of President Trump when I hear language from you rather than Wall talking about a fence or other border measures. John Kelly was just interviewed by the LA Times and made a bit of news saying this on the wall. It's not a wall, he said. The President still says wall. Oftentimes, frankly, he'll say barrier or fencing. Now he's tended towards steel slats, but we left a solid concrete wall early on in the administration when we asked people what they needed and where they needed it. And furthermore, on this back and forth, this was Mick Mulvaney, the President's acting chief of staff, on Friday on that issue.
The Democrats have simply shut down the discussions. They did not even counter us. We went back to them, by the way, after their second $1.3 billion and picked a number less than 5. So we actually came off of our $5 billion slightly. They, instead of coming up from their $1.3 billion, left town.
So perhaps you can use this as a message to Democrats. Where is the President willing to give on these issues? Is it on a dollar amount? Is he willing to come off that $5 billion? Is it simply in the language and the wording of the wall or the fence?
Well, it is a silly semantic argument because people who just want to say wall, wall, wall want it to be a 4-letter word and not respect what Customs and Border Patrol and ICE tell us they need, which is enhancements at the border. There may be a wall in some places, there may be steel slats, there may be technological enhancements. And so, but always saying wall or no wall is being very disingenuous and turning a complete blind eye to what is a crisis at the border when it comes to the drugs pouring in. You know, all the fentanyl that ICE interdicted last year, enough to kill every man, woman, and child in this country, didn't walk over the border by itself. The gang members who are coming in, the folks who are coming in, the criminal aliens, because the Democrats voted against Kate's law, Sanctuary Cities law. They voted against the removal of criminal aliens law. Now they're not coming to the table of border security. I believe the president is already compromised. He originally asked for $25 billion. The House is at 5.6. Right. They did their job. The Senate has to come back. It's a modest investment. And by the way, when we're talking about CPB and ICE, if some of the Democrats had their way, the more left-wing ones, we wouldn't have ICE and we wouldn't have CPB. We wouldn't have the folks who rescued 4,300 people in the last year. You hear about the tragic deaths of these migrant children. You don't hear about the over 4,000 individuals who were rescued by CPB.
And we know the president has been tweeting about that as well, pointing fingers at Democrats for what is happening at the border and the loss of those two children.
This needs to be a bipartisan issue. It needs to be a nonpartisan issue with a bipartisan solution. Border security and national security is everyone's business, and it is dismaying to watch a number of these Democratic senators who, instead of coming to the table and talking about border security for this nation, Sandra, running in 2020.
So the standoff continues.
Clearly, they're talking about 2020.
Clearly, based on this discussion,
talking about 2018.
The shutdown continues. The standoff continues. We'll see what happens here. Got to get to a couple other things before we let you go, Kellyanne. The markets this week. While we have seen during this presidency, President Trump tout record-breaking U.S. stock market, it's not been the case this month. In the month of December alone, it's on track to be the worst month for the U.S. stock market in almost 10 years. It's down 9% this month. What is the president saying today on the state of the markets and the volatility that we've seen?
Well, the president knows that markets ebb and flow, but he knows that they're up from his election day, and he knows that he's presiding over the lowest unemployment rate in about 50 years, lowest ever for African Americans and Hispanic Americans.
Does it concern him what's happening?
We want the robust Trump economy to continue, which is unemployment under 4% and growth in a few of those quarters over 4%. The fundamentals are strong. You know, our Secretary of Treasury made the calls to the major banks and reported that they have said there's liquidity there. We know there's great consumer confidence if you look at what was spent over the holiday season. We also know that we're nearing, I read, $4 trillion in household debt, you know, whether it's credit cards or student loans and whatnot. But this president, the fundamentals are there. The 12 regulations out for every new one in 2018, the massive Tax Cut and Jobs Act boon to this economy 1 year ago that has led to raises and bonuses and a repatriation of wealth that was parked legally overseas. The corporate tax rate going from 35% to 21% has spurred so much growth. People aren't just looking at job security now, they're looking at job mobility. The job seekers, the job holders, and the job creators have all benefited on the Trump economy. So he's watching that. He will do what it takes to keep this economy fortified and growing.
It's great to have you here with so much happening on a busy weekend. Two other subjects. One quickly on Syria. The president has said, and he has defended his decision to pull troops out of Syria, saying a lot of people are going to come around to his way of thinking. What has been done by this administration to ease the concerns of our allies in the wake of that decision?
Well, the president told me just yesterday that he had a terrific closed-door meeting in Iraq when he and the First Lady went to applaud our troops for the great job that they're doing for this nation in Iraq and in Germany. But in Iraq, he had a closed-door meeting, and he said, watch what happens. And this guy always wins. Watch what happens. Because he's got plans, and I won't get ahead of his announcement, but he did want me to convey that. Secondly, I took note that in a major mainstream, if not left-leaning newspaper, the former U.S. ambassador to Syria under President Obama was applauding the president's actions to come out of Syria. He says it may not be popular among some, but it's the right thing to do, and here's how to do it best. This president has said to some of us who are around him on a regular basis, it breaks his heart to write those letters again and again to the parents of those American troops who are killed in Syria, and that we also know that this president is cleaning up the mess left by the last administration, who never took the advance of ISIS in Syria seriously. They talked about some goofy red line, never enforced that. But this president doesn't believe in endless wars with American troops, and I'm so happy that he and the First Lady went to Iraq, went to Germany, and thanked the troops up close and personal. It was the right thing to do, and he was happy to do it.
Final question to you, Kellyanne, and I know we're covering a lot of ground here. A big week is coming up for sure. You've got Defense Secretary James Mattis out January 1st. We just saw the interview from John Kelly. He's out January 2nd. January 3rd, a new Congress begins. What are the president's expectations before you go for the week to come and the year to come?
Sure. Well, first, the Democrats have to come back. Nancy Pelosi needs to come back from Hawaii. Less hula, more moolah for the DHS, Customs and Border Patrol, funding our border security. They need to come to the table and do their job. A fully functioning democracy demands that both parties come together and that the Congress and the executive branch work together. The president also has been listening to the joyful noises that many Democrats have been making on your network and elsewhere, Sandra, promising to work on infrastructure as a big priority. We hope that's true, because that is a major priority for this president and always has been. He's a builder, and he wants to see things happening. Obviously, keeping all of the agencies funded, including DHS, reopening the government, getting that border security funding going. He's got his State of the Union coming up. That's being worked on now as well. And I think the president will continue to focus on a robust economy, immigration, foreign policy, and and really make sure people understand that that 2.6% raise that he promised the military and reiterated over this weekend, he's take that to the bank, because he passed the $700 billion for them last year, $716 billion or so for them this year. And in there is the 2.6% raise. They deserve it. They work to keep us free, to allow us to have this conversation, particularly as women in a thriving democracy.
Always a good time to thank all of our servicemen and women, and we'll do that this morning. And Kellyanne Conway,
God bless them.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. Thanks for joining us, and good to speak with you.
Thank you. Happy, healthy New Year.
And to you as well.
Well, it's hard for most of us to imagine what it must be like to be Brett Kavanaugh right now, but David Sorensen has some idea. He once worked as a White House speechwriter. He was fired after the Washington Post published an article accusing him of domestic violence. Without a conviction or solid evidence, and without much time to respond to the charges, he lost his job and his reputation was destroyed. If current trends continue, a lot of people might learn what that's like. David Sorensen joins us tonight to tell us. David, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
So I'll just say up front, I mean, I know nothing about your marriage or the details even of this case. All I know is that you did not have a chance to respond. There didn't seem to be concrete evidence these charges were true. They were made by someone who had, I think, motive to make them. And the consequences you suffered were overwhelming. What was your response to this?
Well, I felt a deep and profound frustration. I think that Judge Kavanaugh is feeling that right now, as we speak, probably, that I never thought I'd feel in my life. And the feeling of having your reputation that you've so carefully built over so many years be destroyed in an instant. And furthermore, for millions of people to believe these baseless accusations simply because they fit a political narrative is incredibly frustrating. And I couldn't imagine how difficult it must be. Actually, well, I could for Judge Kavanaugh in the situation he's in right now. It's terrible.
What I find so striking,
reputation is something that's
you can't get back. Well, I find so striking. So there are lots of crimes committed in this country all the time, and in almost all of them, we wait to hear the evidence, then we weigh it to decide what we think of it. But in this one specific category of alleged crime, we weight it dramatically to one side. So did you feel like you had the onus of proving that you weren't a domestic abuser? Did you feel like people just automatically believed your ex-wife?
Yes, absolutely. Even though there was no evidence whatsoever, it was simply a baseless allegation. It contradicts everything we've learned throughout our lives about justice, about fairness. It contradicts the legal system that we've built up carefully over centuries to create a fair forum for getting to the bottom of the truth. And it's really scary how the left is waging a war on the basic building blocks of our civilization when it comes to priorities like truth, fairness, merit, reason. These are things that are thrown right out the window at the expense of their pursuit of political power.
Yeah,
and it's also equally shameful to see the media just participate in it so egregiously. When they used to be considered, or ideally they were considered to be sort of an arbiter of truth, or an institution in our society that was designed to uncover the truth, and now they're participating in these reprehensible smear jobs.
Yeah, well, they're a herd of craven dumb people. It's just such a sad and ominous trend for those of us who have sons.
It is terrible, and
yeah, it is.
Your reputation is something that's gained by the raindrop and lost by the bucketful. And Judge Kavanaugh is learning that the hard way, and I hope that we're calling him Justice Kavanaugh despite it all very soon.
David Sorensen, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.